I've assigned this project many times. The syllabus says, before we consider how children learn to read, you must first consider your own reading history, attitudes and interests. You will present a project to the class that expresses you as a reader by answering some guiding questions. Now, I've seen students construct their literate identities in roadmaps and fingerprints, Jeopardy boards and photo albums, Prezi and PowerPoint, sometimes using metaphors, sometimes using drawings. Only once before did I start this assignment and abandoned it after taking some half-hearted photos of my bookshelf. Yet I spend my days and sometimes my nights thinking about literacy and literacy processes. I visit both the public and campus libraries physically and electronically throughout the week. I teach about reading. I struggle with my own reading. I think about youth engagement with literacy and contemplate storytelling and narrative. I talk about reading with friends who read. I talk about writing with friends who write. For writing is reading's intimate bedfellow. I read and I write daily by virtue of my studies, my non-for-profit work and my teaching. I read and write postcards, emails, syllabi, proposals, grants, lesson plans, papers and letters of recommendation. So the question, what does reading mean to you, seems simplistic. I love reading. I love to read. I love when you find that line or that phrase and you think, I had that same experience. I felt that way. I remember a time in my life when I was in crisis, yet there in books, random books, was advice that alleviated my solitude. In Monica Lee's Brick Lane, in Nick Hornsby's How to Be Good. Later, in another time of loneliness, there was Beryl Markham's The Splendid Outcast sitting on a shelf in a small town in rural Iowa, waiting for me when I was sorely lacking in adventure and needed her just then. I've always been a reader. I remember learning to read black text from strips of white paper on the kitchen floor of our house in Aldana Court. I remember bringing home my first book from kindergarten. It was very disappointing. Not because it was about guinea pigs, but because it was too easy. Beverly Cleary and I later became intimate. I remember reading Ramona books well into the night under the covers despite threats from my mother. I plowed through Sweet Valley Twins and Babysitter's Club books well into 7th grade, until a teacher dared me to read Fair Stood the Winds for France. I remember reading the epic Thornbirds cover to cover on an equally epic flight from Belgium to Australia. One year I was living with a man and the relationship had dissolved beyond redemption. He left for the week and I recall the relief. That night I sat down with a glass of wine, a plate of pâté and crackers and started a novel. A complete luxury given the amount of academic reading I was supposed to be doing. It was the Friday night knitting club, a terrible, engrossing, girly read, and I started that book and moved from chair to couch to bed without pause until I finished. I used to read Maeve Binchy this way, Nicholas Sparks. There is nothing more fabulous to me than a cover-to-cover read. At the moment, I'm reading snatches of many things. Jeanette Winterson's Written on the Body, a book on rural education, and a small pile of books all on digital storytelling. I want to revisit Sonia Nito's The Light in Their Eyes and try Norman Denizen's The Qualitative Manifesto. There is a pile that spreads from under my bedside table across the floor, gathering dusk. They look like they're trying to escape. I read in bed, on planes, by pools, at the beach, on my sofa, at my computer, and not as often as I would like. I read books for school or books whose titles capture my current emotional state. I generally read contemporary fiction, and I feel like I don't choose books, rather they choose me. But if I'm looking, I pick books with names like The Last Letter from Your Lover, Those Who Save Us, and I Wish Someone Were Waiting for Me Somewhere. I feel compelled to buy these books as if they might have an answer. I have some all-time favourite reads, Chimamanda Adichie's Half of a Yellow Sun, Abraham Verghese's Cutting for Stone, and Barbara Kingsolver's Poisonwood Bible. These are books that I think changed me in small, small ways or resonated with me in big, big ways. I also loved Garth Stein's The Art of Racing in the Rain, Julia Alvarez's The Time of the Butterflies, and Paula McLean's The Paris Wife. My favourite authors include Lionel Shriver and Ben Elton. I used to seek out Bill Bryson. I like Amy Tan. I love Anna Gavalda, Esme Raj Cadell, and Vivian Paley. I have to stop myself from hoarding cookbooks, beautiful fat tomes with gorgeous pictures and stories spun between recipes. What do I do if a book is too easy? Well, I like a book that reads itself. But I don't like inconsistencies in the story. She arrives by car and leaves by taxi. That's just bad editing. What do I do if a book is too hard? Honestly, I tend to abandon it. What do I think makes a good reader? For that answer, You'll have to attend the class.